أرحب بكم في ليبيا وأشكركم على تلبيتكم.
First, I would like to welcome you in Libya and thank you for responding to the invitation from the Green Auditorium. The entire world heard on March the 2nd, 2005, that I had addressed an invitation to all the influential activists in the world, including professors, thinkers, students, politicians and writers, to come to the Green Auditorium, which would open its doors to them to study the Green Book. I felt that the world was in dire need of studying it, and asked the People's Congresses to set aside a special additional budget to accommodate these visitors, scholars and researchers seeking to study the Green Book. The Jamahiriya system and direct popular democracy. This is a historic day because this is the first meeting held in response to that appeal. It's a meeting at the global level with people from friendly Russia, including professors, thinkers, writers, and members of the Duma. This is a very important meeting because it is held with the first vanguard of politics and thought in the world. It's our hope that this vanguard that came from Russia will be followed by other vanguards from the US Congress, the Chinese People's Assembly, the British House of Lords and House of Commons, India, and Europe. We also hope, in addition to members of parliaments, writers, thinkers, researchers and students will come to sit in the Green Auditorium and study the Green Book. I believe that the solution lies in the Green Book, but the world has yet to understand it because it's been the subject of a blackout and has been banned in most countries in the world, since they know that the Green Book aims to change the world from a world of injustice and exploitation to a world of direct popular democracy and popular socialism. Those who hold the reins of power don't want to share it with anyone. They ban the Green Book because it instigates those who have never had a stake in power and never participated in it. The Green Book instigates ordinary citizens, common people, the man on the street, the poor, and all these great masses that are marginalized from power and wealth and are used as cannon fodder in oppressive, exploitative societies where they sustain themselves with the leftovers of the rich and live off the service they provide for those who control power and wealth. This is an unfair, unacceptable, unjust, dictatorial, exploitative, and inhumane situation. It is intolerable and unbearable for us, the simple people, the masses, the poor people who have a right to the land and a right to life. We, the overwhelming majority, do not accept this strategic, historical marginalization or this abuse. We do not accept to be in the service of the rich and the exploiters, and to protect the society of exploitation as soldiers and policemen, guarding the institutions of the rich and ensuring their comfort. We do not accept to be used by the elite that have imposed itself through dictatorship as cannon fodder in wars for the sake of its capitalist, economic, imperialist interests. The simple, poor, common soldier has no interest in fighting a war outside his country. When he comes back after fighting, assuming he does come back, he has gained nothing. Rather, if he comes back, he is missing an arm, a leg, his sight, his hearing, or even his mind, and sometimes he loses his life itself. It's the ideology of oppression and exploitation that is prevailing in the world today, according to which oppressive forces, by using money, win elections and assume power, while a handful of the moneyed elite enlist this political tool in their service and force the simple and the needy, the overwhelming majority, to suffer, endure hardships, and die for their sake. This handful of politicians and rich people attained this position by the unnatural and illegitimate means of exploitation and the use of money which was acquired by sucking the blood of the workers. A rich man is only rich because there are poor people who serve him out of need. Thus, he becomes rich, having sucked the blood and exploited their efforts to become rich. These moneyed handfuls are to be found in every country in the world
هذه الحفنة من الأغنياء
and are the cause of
كلها في العالم.
the tragedy of mankind now
الفقير لا يمكن يصبح
and of
رئيس
wars, terrorism, action, and reaction.
ده سنده الأغنياء.
It is they who are the source of power, because a poor man cannot become president except with the backing of the rich, so that every power now is the power of money.
المال هو الذي يصنع.
There is no democracy at present,
المال اللي هو الحرام والسرقة الحرام وهذا المال
but there is only money,
لم يتكدس
which is the source of power.
الأغنياء
It is illicit money,
لأنه نزل عليهم
which did not accumulate in the hands of a wealthy handful because it descended on them from heaven, but was the result
هذا الثنائي
of exploitation.
من الرأسماليين
This
والأغنياء
duo of capitalists and oppressive politicians
والعسفيين
is the cause of the woes
الثنائي الذي
and problems plaguing the world.
في استغلال وعسف الأغلبية العظمى هو سبب البلاء والمشاكل التي يعاني منها العالم الآن.
At no time in history
المواطنون العاديون في أي فترة من فترات التاريخ في أي مكان من العالم
at no time in history and nowhere in the world have ordinary citizens had the readiness, the desire, or the need to go to faraway places to destroy, then colonize them. But those who have financial interests are the ones who want to seize the wealth of others and the power, which is their handiwork, force those simple people out of their homes, and then send them far away to enter other homes with which they have no enmity, to plunder and destroy them and kill their inhabitants, as has happened in every stage of colonialism experienced by mankind. Unfortunately, we had thought that colonialism itself had come to an end, only to find out that it was renewing itself in a brutal manner. However, it is both positive and tragic that it is now certainly difficult to colonize the land of others, settle in it, and seize its resources, because it is clearly possible now for the colonized to resist and to have access to very effective means of resistance. The ordinary citizen is capable of packing his car with explosives and blowing it up, and blowing himself up. The possibilities are now widely available thanks to the information revolution and the spread of science and knowledge. Thus, arms smuggling and arms trafficking are no longer under control. In the past, colonialism succeeded because it was not possible for peoples to resist fiercely, as is now the case. Back then, arms were limited and factories were owned by the invader or the colonizer, while the others were unarmed, thus making them vulnerable and exposing their land to invasion, destruction, and seizure. It was not possible then for the peoples to make weapons or explosives because all things were unknown to them. Now some arrogant powers do not take this transformation into account and believe that colonialism can be effected easily as it was in the past. But colonialism now, unlike the past, is a difficult enterprise. It's short-lived and cannot take root in the land of others because those others are now capable of manufacturing weapons and explosives. Manufacturing these has become universally accessible thanks to the internet, which provides access to the state of the art sciences. Colonialism is still practiced, but this time in the face of fierce resistance that was possible in the past. Such a development is, of course, tragic as one person can blow himself up and kill scores of people. From a humanitarian stance point of view, we say this is tragic because large numbers of people are killed using modern means. But this same colonialism possesses lethal means, including nuclear bombs. And the means of destruction are now, unfortunately, available for both sides. However, the positive aspect is that it makes it difficult for the imperialists and the colonialists to seize the land of others and settle therein. But achieving this result involves great sacrifices and major losses for both sides. The world is now in the grip of a crisis. There are demonstrations, protests, unemployment, and inflation everywhere, and grievances, discontent, arrests, rebellion, revolt, and victims. There's virtually a world war and no peace, stability, safety, peace of mind, or hope in the social, economic, and political environment prevailing in the world now. The world is based on a theory of a colonizer and colonized, master and slave, and rich and poor, and on the theory of wage, hiring, trafficking, representation, marginalization, negation, and cynical disregard for the broad masses. Thus, hundreds of millions are represented by
شيء مؤسف
hundreds of individuals,
وغير مجدي.
which is regrettable, ridiculous,
دولة
and futile.
مثلا
For instance, we find a country of 300 million people
300 شخص،
with a parliament
هذا شيء يدعو
of 300 members, which is laughable,
هذه بنية من البنيان العصر
unfortunate,
الحديث، وهي
and problematic.
اللي تسبب مشاكل. 300 مليون، تأكدوا أن 300 نائب لا يعبرون
The 300 million have realized that the 300 representatives
يستطيعون تمثيلهم.
do not express their desires,
تخطوهم وأعلنوا أن التمثيل تدجيل،
share their dreams,
أن هذا ضرب من الدجل، أن تأتي ب 300
or represent them,
هؤلاء
and hence
300 مليون.
has bypassed them
300 مليون غير
and declared that representation is a fraud.
300 شخص من النواب يمثلون
It is fraudulent to bring 300 people
لا يستطيعون
and
الحلم
claim
نيابة
that they are the 300 million.
ولا أن يتمنوا
The 300 representatives only represent themselves
يحسوا إحساس الملايين
and cannot dream for the millions or share their desires and their feelings.
وبالتالي فشل التمثيل وتخطته الشعوب، ونرى الشعوب في شارع والنواب في شارع.
Therefore, representation failed and the peoples have gone beyond it.
قد يكون الانتخاب
Thus, the people and the representatives are not on the same page. There may be a parliament which claims that it was elected, and it is possible that the election, in a few cases, was not rigged, but the peoples have given up on parliaments and representatives, and we see them out on the streets expressing their demands directly.
إذا حكومات قررت الحرب
This is proof
على العراق
that the representatives have failed to speak
ضد هذه الحرب.
for these peoples.
ما معنى هذا؟ معنى هذا إن
When some governments decided to go to war against Iraq,
عما تريده هذه
millions demonstrated against the war.
لو هم يعبرون
What does this mean? It means that the representatives did not express the demands
لعارضوا الحرب.
of these peoples that had elected them.
معنى هذا
Because
عشرات
if they had spoken
تحكم
for the peoples
معناها عشرات
and shared their wishes and dreams,
البرلمانات لا تمثل،
they would have opposed the war.
لأن هذه البرلمانات وافقت على إرسال هذه.
Therefore,
كيف البرلمان
representation
يوافق؟ إذن البرلمان لا يمثل
is
شيء.
a fraud,
التمثيل تجيل.
which means that scores of peoples
يجب إلغاء
are ruled by
النيابة
dictatorial regimes
هذه المهزلة
and are not represented by parliaments, because these parliaments approve the dispatch of forces.
العصر القديم.
How can the parliament approve when the people do not? Hence, the parliament does not represent the people. Representation is a fraud, and mediation, representation, and parliaments must be abolished. This farce must be placed in the museum as an ancient relic, because peoples can rule themselves.
مئات الأشخاص الكثير،
But how can a people of 100 million rule themselves?
عشرات الأشخاص
We are accustomed to a government consisting of 20, 15 or 10 ministers who govern, and a parliament consisting of scores of people or hundreds of people sitting in a chamber that accommodates scores of people or hundreds of people who decide for the people. But how can the people rule themselves by themselves? How can the people, men and women, sit in session and rule themselves by themselves? Naturally, the short-sighted view would say that it's impossible and settle for representation. with a few people representing millions. This view is erroneous. As it views democracy as a matter of distance and size of chambers. But that is not the way to view it. Wherever the people are found, whether in the neighborhood or the village, they convene in people's congresses, in which all adults, men and women, participate and decide what they want. Then, if the entire people decided to declare war against a state, then that war would be legitimate, because the people felt that war was inevitable with that neighboring state or a state that is separated from it by an ocean and continents, although that would be highly unlikely. If a law was passed, it would be passed by the people, the adult men and women sitting in session. Then, if you were sentenced to death under that law would be sacred, because it was passed by all the people who felt that such a crime should be punishable by death. And you yourself were among those who deliberated and eventually decided that the perpetrator of such a crime deserves the death punishment. So you would willingly submit to the punishment because you took part in drafting the law and were convinced of it, because it would not be fair for you to submit to such a punishment under a law passed by others. Those others may be called a parliament, a government, a revolutionary council, or what you will. Such a law that you had no hand in, you would not obey. Not only in regard to capital punishment, but even in paying a fine, imprisonment, or arrest. This defect
ويزورون الحقائق لتبرير حكمهم، تبرير سياساتهم التعسفية، ولتبرير الخطأ.
This defect in the social, economic, and political structures in the world today has precipitated the crisis besetting the world at present, and produced the rulers who brag, fabricate, and distort the truth to justify their rule and their unjust policies. This policy is of no use to the peoples, and the world cannot solve problems. When a reaction occurs, the people would say, this reaction against us was by a person for whom we caused a problem. However, the ruler would not only transgress against another, but would not admit his error. Such fraud and deception does not serve the people, peace, mankind, or even those who espouse such logic. since the social,
البنيات السياسية
economic,
الاقتصادية مبنية على الخطأ.
political
كل
structures
ما يصدر الآن هو تبرير لهذا الخطأ.
are based on error.
لأن الخطأ هذا في
So all actions
الدكتوريات وعدم
are taken
وعدم قيام الجمعية
to justify this error,
الشعبية
which breeds injustice, exploitation, and dictatorship. Peoples do not rule themselves, and there are no Jamahiriya and no popular socialism, because all social relations are based on injustice and exploitation. Peoples are ruled by proxy, and laws are not passed by the people, but by someone else in the name of the people, which is a sham. The wealth of the earth belongs to all the inhabitants of the earth, and the wealth of every country belongs equally to all the people of that country. But this is not the case, because power and wealth are controlled by a handful, which only attained its position by crooked means. Therefore, whatever policies are pursued are only designed to justify this fallacy. We, the common citizens, hear outstanding things from governments and politicians. They tell us that black is white and white is black. What we see as black, they say is white. And we expected to accept such a distortion. This is amazing. The truth is that if you say this is white, not black, then you're a rogue, a deviant, and wrong. They tell you, we said that this is black and you said that this is white, which means that you disagreed with us. And whoever disagrees with us is a rogue and insane. This is a falsehood and a fallacy, which is prevailing in the world today as a result of the marginalization of the peoples from wealth and power.
هذه قاعدة مبنية على الخطأ، مبنية على الكذب والتدليس، وإن اللون ما هوش هو اللون، هو أبيض لازم يقولوا عليه أسود. هذا اللي ماشي في العالم الآن. السبب هو تهميش الشعوب. كل الجماهير مهمشة في الثروة، مهمشة في السلطة. لو الشعوب هي اللي تصدر القوانين وتصدر قرارات وترسم السياسات.
If it was the peoples who passed laws, made decisions and crafted policies, the world would be a world of peace, equanimity, stability, love and cooperation. Because peoples do not hate each other and seek peace and stability. No people would leave their land to occupy the land of another people. An army that leaves its country to occupy other countries is made up of needy people drafted by an unjust authority, which is the product of the wealth owned by a handful of exploiters who made the politicians, who drafted the needy to form an army and ordered them to go and die outside their land, and if they come back, they are missing a leg, an arm, their eyesight, or their hearing. This is what is happening in the world today. If those soldiers who left their land to occupy and destroy another land had stayed at home as ordinary people, they would not have had the desire to cross their borders and commit such heinous acts. But orders and need forced them to become soldiers for the politicians and the exploiters. And as long as they were soldiers, they would be given orders to die and colonize. Thus, in the world today, a blackout is imposed on the Green Book. The Green Book is a dangerous book written by al-Gaddafi, whereas in actual fact the Green Book was not written by al-Gaddafi but by the history of mankind. The Green Book is the lessons learned from our history as human beings. It's an analysis of all the facts of our past life, both sweet and bitter. The Green Book states such and such a problem occurred because things were not handled this way. Handle them this way and there will be no problem. Why were people unhappy in the past? We have found out that he who is not free cannot be happy. We found out that he who is in need cannot be free. Therefore, freedom lies in need, and in freedom lies happiness. You will not be happy unless you are free. We found out in the past that people were not happy because they were not free, and they were not happy, and they were not free because they were in need. For people to be happy, they must be free, and to be free, they must not be in need, according to the Green Book. It is the history of mankind, which says that on the basis of lessons learned, humanity which says this, authored the Green Book. Now, thank God, the Green Book and the ideas of the Green Book may have launched the third universal theory, which is beginning to be heard and studied in the age of the internet, satellites, and the information revolution. Nobody, no matter how hostile to humanity and the Green Book, can stop the ideas of the Green Book from spreading. And they will spread, despite those who do not want that. The Green Book and its ideas will be diffused over the internet and through all the modern mass media all over the world. Now in Russia, in the Duma, professors and friendly writers have organized societies for the friends of the Green Book, which shows that the Green Book is beginning to reach America. Some say that a country like Libya, with a small population, is suited to the Jamahiriya system. On the contrary, a small state does not need the Green Book. The Jamahiriya system and people's power not needed as much as the big state. The greater the population of a state, the more it needs the Jamahiriya system. If we take China as an example, it is inconceivable for a single individual or entity to rule this empire. Also, one in Beijing cannot know the problems of people all over China, and no government, no matter how sincere, intelligent, and concerned with the people's interests, can manage the affairs of the population of China. This is not possible, because the representatives, who will be in the hundreds, cannot represent people in the billions. We are in the process of answering the question regarding the manner in which the people can rule themselves by themselves. It is the government that rules and the representatives who rule. But how can the people rule? We have said that the people rule themselves not by bringing them into a single chamber, which is a very superficial view. The people stay wherever they are and convene people's congresses, where they decide whatever they want. These congresses, unlike assemblies, include all the population without exception. There is a difference between assemblies and congresses. Assemblies are elected by the people, but the congresses comprise all of the people, leaving no one outside them. These congresses form people's committees, which implement the decisions of the congresses. This is self-management. Thus, no law is passed unless endorsed by all the people. It is not proposed by the government or the parliament. They, if present, have the right to make proposals, but every ordinary citizen who has an idea for a law is entitled to propose it to the entire people. If the people endorse the law, it goes into effect. However, in view of the prevailing injustice, the ordinary citizen is marginalized and cannot propose an idea for a law in his country. Who would listen to a citizen in India who says, "I have a wonderful idea for a law"? No one would, because this is not considered within his competence. Why? Because that citizen has been robbed of his will and even his dignity for the sake of the representative. Since you have elected a representative for you, then you are a member of a constituency represented by him, and he proposes the laws. Then, can one, as an ordinary citizen, contact this representative? No, that is impossible, because your relation with him had been completely severed the day you placed that ballot in the ballot box. He became a representative, and you became an ordinary citizen, robbed of everything. It is the representatives who are entitled to propose or pass laws. Then the millions who make up the people, the entire nation, do not have this right and are marginalized. As long as the nation is marginalized and has no right, then what's the need for this whole process, including the representation, the government, and all these mechanisms? This shows the invalidity of these mechanisms and the structures extant in the whole world. It is imperative to sweep away the representatives, the rulers, the classes, and the parties, and leave the people to rule themselves by themselves. Partisanship itself is an obsolete tool among the classical structures that cannot stand the challenges and the requirements of the modern age. All the criteria and the structures in use now are obsolete. The flow, the demands, the requirements, and the challenges of the masses are too great for partisan structures, which are museum pieces. If the dialogue continues with you, Russian friends, members of the Duma, professors, writers, and journalists, it will be possible to begin thinking of convincing the people in Russia, for example. In this regard, we would like to answer a question asked by a friend whether it be possible to establish a Jamahiriya without violence. We do not need any violence at all. We only need persuasion. If, through your efforts, together with other groups, the Russian people were convinced that power must be the prerogative of the people through the People's Congresses and the People's Committees, there will be a direct transition from the Republic to the Jamahiriya, from injustice and dictatorship to direct popular democracy, without having to go through certain stages. The Marxist-Leninist theory, the ideas of Marx and Engels, are utopian ideas which, if applied, would have created an earthly paradise. However, because they are utopian, they did not succeed. This is a lost paradise which we would have wished to attain, but we did not achieve communism. We have an image of communism, but we have never seen it, because it's a long process, and we have to go through the national phase, followed by the socialist phase, under the slogan, who does not work does not eat. Then from socialism, we go through several stages until we reach communism, when the slogan becomes, to each according to his need, and from each according to his ability. When would that be achieved?
متى يتحقق هذا؟ يتحقق هذا عندما يتكدس الإنتاج.
When would that be achieved? When production accumulates, property becomes
تختفي
communal,
حتى البروليتاريا
and even the proletariat disappears,
يصبح الشعب من طبقة واحدة.
and the people
هذا شيء
becomes
جميل،
one class.
لكنه لم يتحقق لأن تعبنا قبل لا نوصل إليه.
This would have been beautiful had it been achieved,
الثورة الوطنية
but
والاشتراكية
it was not,
تكدس الإنتاج وبعدين
because we got tired before reaching it.
المراحل
Communism was not achieved
من يضمن نحن
because there is a defect in the theory.
ما تكدس الإنتاج حتى وصلنا للشيوعية. يعني دهشنا لما وصلنا للاشتراكية ما انترناشونال، لأن الاشتراكية تتطلب أن لكي نصل للشيوعية تكدس الإنتاج أن لازم نعمل للدولة، كلنا نعمل للدولة. لكن لما نعمل لأنفسنا، يعني إيراداتنا تعود لنا، دخلنا يعود لنا، إنتاجنا يعود لنا، لم يبقى شيء للمجتمع حتى يتكدس، حتى يصبح لكل حسب حاجته وكل حسب فهمه. هذا درس مستفاد. هناك نظرية طوباوية اسمها الشيوعية، كان يمكن لو تتحقق يتحقق النعيم الأرضي، لكنه لم يتحقق هذا بسبب خلل في الجدلية عموما. ما هو العمل؟ الدرس المستفاد.
What is to be done? The lesson learned is that if there is a possibility to skip stages, it should be seized. For instance, in Russia, through the active members of the Duma, the professors, the students, and the intellectuals, we can quietly teach the Green Book and distribute it.
شكلوا مؤتمرات شعبية، والمؤتمرات الشعبية تشكل لجان شعبية وتقوم ديمقراطية شعبية.
When that takes place, there will be a transition in Russia from the current situation to the status of the direct, popular, democratic Jamahiriya. It is certain that the whole world will adopt the Jamahiriya system one day. We are now only going through a phase, but everything in the world is moving forward. And as long as this is the case, the world will certainly reach the Jamahiriya without violence, which we don't need at all. Some people think that since the Green Book is the work of al-Gaddafi, it must involve violence and the use of weapons, which reflects ignorance of the Green Book. They should read the Green Book. I hear some attributing certain statements erroneously to the Green Book. They say that the Green Book states that the Quran must be the Sharia of society. But this is not in the Green Book at all. It speaks of the sacred law in any society and says that its customs and religion, which means the mores and traditions, which enjoy consensus and respect. If a society believes in any religion, be it the religion of Buddha, Muhammad or Jesus, then that is a fixed, unchangeable law. Every people have their own mores and traditions, which can only be changed through social evolution and not by decree. People have always agreed on certain rules of behavior, which are the genuine, fixed Sharia that can't be changed by the parliament or the government.
الاعتقاد الإيماني بأي شيء هو بالقرآن. القرآن بالنسبة للمسلمين.
they represent a belief in something which is not necessarily the Quran. It is the Quran only for Muslims. When we speak of Muslims, we say that the Quran is Sharia because it is Sharia for... You say the Quran is Sharia because it is Sharia for all those who believe in Islam. And those who believe in the Bible, the Torah, Buddha, Zoroaster, Confucius, they hold these beliefs sacred and unchangeable. And this is Sharia. As for the constitution and such, that can be called a law, because the parliament may meet tomorrow and change the constitution, as constitutions can be changed at any time in any country of the world. However, we cannot trust nor have faith in something that can be changed by a handful of people meeting in a room like this. But we trust and have faith in something that can only be changed through evolution. The Green Book says that your Sharia is the Quran if you are a Muslim. But if you are not a Muslim, then your Sharia is based on your holy book. Every nation has its own Quran. One calls it the Bible, another calls it the Torah. So each one gives it a name. Such statements are attributed wrongly to the Green Book. It must be translated accurately, since I have seen confusion in some of the translation. For instance, I saw in the English version the word participation, which is not the right word, since it is not a matter of participation with the people. The people have no partner.
The authority of the people. مش the participation of the people in the authority. يشارك الشعب. Who is the other partner? ما فيش شريك آخر الشعب عنده السلطة. لما يترجم كتاب الأخضر بهذا الشكل يعطي.
When the Green Book is translated in this manner, the meaning differs from the meaning in Arabic. I have said that this meeting, or this day, is a historic occasion because it marks the first response to the global appeal I launched on the 2nd of February of this year, when I asked nations to come to the Green Auditorium to study the Green Book. Our aim was not to serve the interests of Libya at all, but rather to resolve the present crisis of humanity. It was the elimination of societies of injustice and exploitation, of colonialism, of terrorism, arms, dictatorship, poverty, and exploitative capitalism. We wanted to treat our sick. We wanted to treat our sick world body, purge it of disease, and create it anew. That was the aim of inviting all the peoples to come to the Green Auditorium. It was in the interest of those people and mankind. Those who are hostile to the Green Book or the Green Auditorium are sick with the disease of racism, chauvinism, and narcissism. Isn't this human thought? If you study it and find it useful, why don't you embrace it? Every thinker, philosopher, analyst or prophet in the world belong to us all. We study them, quote them, and benefit from their ideas. And if we excluded them, we would be petty and racist. Then why should one reject the Green Book? Read it, study it, and then judge it. The ideas of Engels, Smith, Bakunin, Montesquieu, Rousseau, and Tolstoy belong to the world. When we reject the ideas of Ibn Hayyan, Avicenna, and Al-Razi, we would be depriving the world of astronomy, mathematics, marine science, and medicine. The ideas of Avicenna in medicine have benefited all of mankind. Had they rejected the ideas of Avicenna because he was a Muslim and Oriental, the world would have been deprived of great benefits. Every drug is called medicine. How'd they say it in Russian? Ibn Sina?
لو حجبناها وحاربناها قلنا ميديسين، كلنا نقولوا ميديسين ميديسين ميديسين. من جاي من ابن سينا. فيش شعب في العالم اللي ما يقول ميديسين، كل الدواء تقولوا له واحد ميديسين يا ميديسين. شو تقولوا له بالروسي ميديسين؟ ها؟ ميديسينا. شوف امشي لاي مكان في العالم لابد يكون سينا سينا في سينا. هذه ابن سينا. إذا فضل ابن سينا على العالم كله في الطب. هذا ملك لكل العالم.
Go anywhere in the world and you will find that this Sina must be a reference to Avicenna. Therefore, a contribution of Avicenna to medicine belongs to the whole world. Had he been rejected out of prejudice, ignorance, or narrow-mindedness, we would have been deprived of medicine, which would have still been in its infancy. If we had have fought the ideas of Jabir ibn Hayyan, al-Idrisi, Abu Bakr, al-Razi, we would have been deprived of many sciences from which the world is benefiting now. Algebra was developed by Jabir ibn Hayyan. Medicine was developed by Avicenna, and astronomy and marine sciences were developed by Oriental Muslim scientists. If we had been prejudiced and said this one is Oriental and that one is a Muslim, we would have been now deprived from astronomy, medicine, and many of the sciences from which we now benefit. By the same token, if we'd have said that electricity and the telephone were developed by Western Christians, we would have been prejudiced and would have hurt ourselves. So the person who developed electricity was not a Muslim. Yet as Muslims, we benefit from it. And the person who developed medicine was not a Christian, and yet Christians benefit from it. This also applies to the Green Book. Whoever fights the Green Book is sick, petty, and needs psychotherapy. They wonder how come such ideas can emerge from Libya. Such hatred is pathological. If you have a political dispute with Libya, that is something else. But as the famous Greek historian Herodotus said, from Libya comes the new. Then, brothers, pay attention. Perhaps the new still comes from Libya. If you happen to have a dispute with Libya over a gulf, a sea, oil or borders, that is something else. But don't say, if a book comes out of Libya, I will not read it. Now, if the rulers of Western countries were to come to the Green Auditorium and study the Green Book, they would contribute with us to resolving the global crisis and curing the world from its sickness. I actually gave up some of the time of my afternoon nap for this meeting. In view of the importance of this delegation, and because it was the first delegation to respond to the global appeal, which I launched on the 3rd of February this year. I wanted this to be an encouragement and a model for other nations to come, as this vanguard came from Russia. Thank you very much, and I hope to meet you again soon. Dr. Rajab Abu Dabus. First, I'd like to thank you for addressing us. I would like, as a footnote, to refer to one of those who has stated that the Green Book possesses a destructive power. A professor in the Sorbonne, Edmund Joffe, said in his book, Gaddafi, My Vision, Gaddafi gave up the atomic bomb and nuclear weapons because they are not viable. But he has a much more potent weapon, which he does not destroy buildings, but destroys the old order. Therefore, the old order will be hostile to him. While listening to Haikal, I heard him refer to subtle force and brute force, and say that subtle force culture and thought will triumph, but bombs and steel will be defeated. It is the Green Book is actually the subtle force which will triumph. Brother leaders, some comrades have some souvenirs they want to present to you. Please go ahead. Oh, this is the emblem of the Russian Federation, a double-headed eagle and a victorious knight.
Okay,
I am from the Republic of Azerbaijan. The leader of Azerbaijan visited you 7 years ago. There have been some changes in the Republic. I would like to give you this book to see those changes. I would like to tell you that the leader always has a great difficult job, because it's extremely difficult to manage social and political relations. But peoples understand each other much